Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India, India's voice to the world. This is News Hour. I'm Mark Lynn. Namaskar. Coming up in the next hour. Chinese and Japanese Coast Guard face off in the East China Sea over the Senkaku Islands. China reasserts claim over the islands a day after Japan, the US and the Philippines hold Trilateral Summit in Washington, D.C. Violence escalates in Israel Hamas conflict. Israel reports killing over 50 Hamas terrorists in the past day. Campaigning is underway in full swing in India. Prime Minister Narendra Modi campaigns in Rajasthan and Jammu and Kashmir. Home Minister Amit Shah campaigns in Uttar Pradesh. And for the Congress party, the President, Mallikarjun Kharge, reaches out to voters in Karnataka. Rahul Gandhi campaigns in Tamil Nadu. And India returns to the Cannes Film Festival after 30 years. Payal Kapadia's All We Imagine as Light to premiere in the competition section at the 77th Cannes Film Festival. Long simmering tensions between China and its neighbors took center stage on Thursday as leaders of the United States, Japan and the Philippines gathered at the White House in a trilateral summit. The US President Joe Biden welcomed his counterparts and said that he wants to take the Indo-Pacific strategy to new heights. Let's look at this report.
US President Joe Biden convened the first ever trilateral summit between the leaders of the United States, Japan and the Philippines at the White House on Thursday, where the president vowed a new era of partnership between the three nations.
Today we mark a historic moment, the first ever leaders summit between the United States, Japan and the Philippines. And it's truly an honor to have you both here as we begin this new era of partnership.
At the start of three-way talks with Kishida and Marcos, President Biden affirmed ironclad commitment to Japan and the Philippines' defense.
The United States' defense commitments to Japan and to the Philippines are ironclad. As I've said before, any attack on Philippine aircraft, vessels, or armed forces in the South China Sea would invoke our mutual defense treaty.
Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida urged US lawmakers to overcome self-doubt over the country's global leadership role and said Japan was determined to do more to share responsibility with the United States.
In order to secure peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific, I hope to reaffirm our intention to further strengthen trilateral cooperation and to present the specific way forward through today's meeting.
China on Friday defended its actions in the South China Sea as appropriate and lawful and criticized the United States, Japan and the Philippines.
China is firmly opposed to the manipulation of bloc politics by the countries concerned, to any practice that provokes or intensifies conflicts to the detriment of the strategic security and interests of other countries, and to the establishment of closed and exclusive small circles in the region.
Tensions in the South China Sea are running high amid numerous incidents, including one in March when China used water cannons to disrupt the Philippine supply mission to soldiers stationed on a grounded warship in the disputed Second Thomas Shoal. Japan also feels under pressure from China, with Chinese Coast Guard ships regularly sailing near the disputed Japanese-controlled East China Sea islands close to Taiwan.
Well, the Chinese and the Japanese Coast Guard had an exchange near the territorial waters of the Senkaku Islands in the East China Sea. Friday's face-off came after the leaders of the United States, Japan and the Philippines held talks at the White House on Thursday to reduce Beijing's pressure on Manila and Japan in the South as well as the East China Seas. This report provides context.
As if taking an affront to the Trilateral Summit between US, Japan and the Philippines that took place on Thursday. Chinese Coast Guard said on Friday that they had patrolled the territorial waters of Diaoyu Islands. These are the same disputed islands that Japan controls and calls the Senkaku Islands in the East China Sea.
I would like to stress the following points. First, China has indisputable sovereignty over the islands in the South China Sea, including Renai Reef and their adjacent waters, and China also has indisputable sovereignty over the Diaoyu Islands and their affiliated islands. China's actions in the East and South China Seas are reasonable, lawful, and irreproachable in accordance with international law. Secondly, there has never been any problem with freedom of navigation and overflight in the South China Sea.
Japan Coast Guard said in a separate statement that its patrol boats had asked 4 Chinese Coast Guard vessels to leave Japanese territorial waters. The Japanese said it was the 10th such instance by Chinese vessels this year. At a White House reception for Prime Minister Kishida earlier this week, US President Joe Biden had stated categorically the extent of the US commitment to Japan, mentioning Senkaku by name.
And through it all, our commitment to the defense of Japan under Article 5, including the Senkaku Islands, is unwavering.
The leaders of the United States, Japan and the Philippines held a summit at the White House on Thursday aimed at restricting Japan's stepped-up pressure on Manila in the disputed South China Sea.
It is a partnership born not out of convenience nor of expediency, but as a natural progression of a deepening relation and robust cooperation amongst our 3 countries.
China's increasing pressure in the South China Sea has escalated despite appeals by US President Biden to Chinese President Xi Jinping last year. Japan highlighted the shared values that the 3 democratic countries share.
Japan, the US, and the Philippines are maritime nations connected by the Pacific Ocean and are natural partners. We share fundamental values and principles and have supported regional economic development.
The Philippines and China had several maritime run-ins last month, including the use of water cannons and heated verbal exchanges. The dispute centers on the Second Thomas Shoal, home to some Filipino troops stationed there on a warship that Manila grounded in 1999 to reinforce its sovereignty claims. China claims almost the entire South China Sea, including the maritime economic zones of its neighbors. Let's understand the Senkaku Island dispute. In 1885, Japan confirmed Senkaku Islands uninhabited and unclaimed. In 1895, Senkaku Islands made part of Okinawa Prefecture. In 1920, China recognizes Senkaku Islands as part of Okinawa. In 1951, San Francisco Peace Treaty ensures Senkaku is part of Japan and the US exercises administrative rights over the islands. In 1969, a UN report indicates potential oil reserves in East China Sea. 1971, Taiwan and China officially assert territorial sovereignty. In 1992, China claims islands are in contiguous zone. In 2008, Chinese SOA that speed of advanced ships intrude into the territorial waters of Senkaku Islands. In 2010, Chinese fishing vessel collides with a Japan Coast Guard vessel. In 2012, more Chinese SOA intrusions into territorial waters. In 2013, China establishes East China Sea Air Defense Identification Zone. In 2016, Chinese naval ships enter Senkaku Islands for the first time. In 2021, China enacts Coast Guard law inconsistent with international law. In 2023, 16 Chinese vessels tracked within territorial waters in 11 months. Despite China's claim, a 2016 ruling by the Permanent Court of Arbitration found that Beijing's claims have no legal basis. Bureau Report, DD India.
And to get some perspective from Washington, we are joined by Caroline Malone, who is joining us from Washington, D.C. Caroline, the White House says that there is no reason for China to see the Trilateral Summit as a threat. What more can you tell us?
Well, from the US perspective, they're viewing this within their bigger Indo-Pacific strategy. That's something that was launched by the Biden administration 2 years ago and that they have re-engaged with recently. So really from their perspective, and we heard again from the White House national security spokesperson on Friday, this is about enhancing economic cooperation. This is about working with allies. This is about looking for mutual opportunities. And they say that is their main priority. But really, there's no doubt here that defense is a big part of that. And so we've seen in the readout from meetings that have happened in the trilaterals and bilaterals with Japan this week, that the US is, prioritizing security of its allies in the region. Biden even coming out and saying definitively that it would defend the Philippines if it needed it. And that's something that dates back many decades that they've made an agreement on many years ago. So really, the US emphasizing that this is about economic opportunity, but clearly there are also defense concerns. And they did, in the readout from meetings, also underline their concern about actions from what they call the PRC China, and particularly the militarization of the region. Your report there was referencing some of the incidents that have happened. In the last few weeks, there have been incidents happening in Philippine waters, so about 200 kilometers off Philippine waters, which are technically under international law deemed to belong to the Philippines. There's been cases about that. But there have been incidents in which, Chinese use water cannon, etc., and have injured some people. So there has been this escalation. And clearly, these three countries that are allies are agreeing that it's important that they shore up their defense at the same time.
Yes, indeed, Caroline. And, the Chinese had opposed what they call bloc politics. And they've even mentioned, Kishida's remarks that China is the biggest strategic challenge to the world. Has the U.S. reacted to this specifically?
So in terms of, what we can deem as bloc politics, there have been a number of agreements between the US and other countries, not just in the last few weeks, but in the last few years. Everything from AUKUS, which includes Australia and the UK, nuclear-powered submarines, which may also, we've heard this week, in the next track include Japan, so they're widening that agreement. We've got the Quad grouping, which includes, of course, India as well, Japan and Australia, and working together on mutual projects. So there are many ways in which the US is working with allies in the region. So it's not just this trilateral between Japan and the Philippines, there's also bilaterals. There's agreements with South Korea as well. And again, this is part of the wider Indo-Pacific strategy in which they are pushing ultimately for economic cooperation, but crucially, we know at the same time that's actions being taken. There's been military drills happening this week in the waters of the South China Sea, in particular with Japan and South Korea. They've been underscoring, though, it's not just about China. They're also concerned about North Korea and North Korea's continued ballistic missile testing and threats that they've made to countries in the region. So really what you're seeing here is the US and its allies coming together and making sure that it's clear that they do stand together and will continue to do so in the future.
Caroline Malone, thank you very much for joining us from Washington, D.C. Still to come here on DD India News Hour. Israel continues its operation against Hamas. Aborted 2022 peace deal between Russia and Ukraine could be the basis for new negotiations. That's what the Kremlin says. 2,500 participants join a dictation contest on the Paris Olympics.
We just don't bring you the news as it unfolds. We get to the heart of the matter.
We don't just present facts, we demystify complex social, political and economic events.
We break stories that shape the world's present and future because you deserve the truth.
I am Tanvi Taneja from New Delhi.
I'm Ollie Barrett from London.
I'm Nick Harper from Washington, D.C.
Join us on DD India Global Monday to Friday at these times.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Mark Lynn. And now let's get you the latest on the world's largest democratic election in India. Prime Minister Narendra Modi continued to lead the ruling BJP's campaign for the upcoming general elections from the front. In Jammu and Kashmir, he highlighted how the abrogation of Article 370 was like breaking down a wall that separated the people from the fruits of development. The Congress Party President Mallikarjun Kharge organized election rallies in Kalburgi and Bidar in his home state of Karnataka. Here's Mihir Makuri with taking stock of the day's action.
With the general elections approaching in India, the political arena is heating up. Campaigning efforts are in full swing as political parties spare no efforts to connect with voters. Prime Minister Narendra Modi held a rally in Udhampur in the mountainous Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir on Friday morning.
सत्ता के लिए इन्होंने जम्मू कश्मीर में 370 की ऐसी दीवार बना दी थी, आपके आशीर्वाद से मोदी ने 370 की दीवार गिरा दी। मैं चुनौती देता हूं, हिंदुस्तान की कोई पॉलिटिकल पार्टी हिम्मत करके आ जाए, विशेष करके मैं कांग्रेस को चुनौती देता हूं, वो घोषणा करे वो 370 को वापस लाएंगे, ये देश उनका मुंह तक देखने को तैयार नहीं होगा।
Following this, Prime Minister visited to the northwestern Indian state of Rajasthan's Barmer region and addressed a public meeting. Later in the day, Prime Minister also conducted a roadshow in Rajasthan's Dausa, which was attended by thousands of supporters. In the northern Indian state of Uttar Pradesh, Home Minister Amit Shah held a rally.
2014 और 19 दोनों में प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी बने, उसका सबसे बड़ा कारण मेरा उत्तर प्रदेश है। सबसे बड़ा कारण उत्तर प्रदेश है। ना 73 चलेगी, ना 65 चलेगी, इस बार 80 की 80 सीटें नरेंद्र मोदी की झोली।
On Friday evening, Home Minister Amit Shah also held a roadshow in Tamil Nadu's Madurai. BJP National President JP Nadda conducted rallies in Madhya Pradesh's Siddhi and Chhindwara. In the land of gods, Uttarakhand, BJP leader and Defence Minister Rajnath Singh held public rallies in Garhwal, Almora and Nainital. Down south, BJP leader and Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman organized a roadshow in Tanjavur in support of the party's candidate. In the opposition camp, Congress President Mallikarjun Kharge organized election rallies in Kalburgi and Bidar, his home state Karnataka, to garner support for the party's candidate. Congress leader Rahul Gandhi addressed a public rally in Friday in Tamil Nadu's Tirunelveli. During the rally, he emphasized that Tamil Nadu's rich culture has greatly enriched his understanding of India.
Whenever I want to understand India, I look at the great Tamil poets. Of course, I don't speak your language, but I read your history, your great kings, your great tradition, the relationships and influence you had in the rest of the world. And it acts for me like a mirror through which I can understand India.
In UP's Pilibhit, Samajwadi Party Supremo Akhilesh Yadav held a public rally.
पीलीभीत का नाम सुनते ही भारतीय जनता पार्टी के तमाम नेताओं का चेहरा पीला हो जा रहा है और ये इसीलिए हो रहा है कि यहाँ की जनता ने इस बार मन बना लिया है और समाजवादी पार्टी को ऐतिहासिक वोटों से जिता करके भेजना चाहती है.
The Election Commission of India on Friday issued the notification for the third phase of voting in the upcoming parliamentary election. Nomination filing started after the notification was issued by the Election Commission. This phase, scheduled for 7th of May, encompasses 94 parliamentary constituencies across 12 states and union territories. As the nation gears up for the elections, all eyes are on the unfolding political developments in the world's largest democracy. Mihir Makuri's report, DD India.
The Israel-Hamas conflict has entered its 7th month and tensions have spilt over into surrounding areas. Meanwhile, Israel is on high alert, with the Israeli chief military spokesperson stating that the IDF is well prepared for a range of scenarios. Let's take a look at this report.
Explosive sounds echo through Gaza, accompanied by plumes of smoke visible from southern Israel. Over the past few days, Israel's military operations have centered around the Al-Shifa hospital, the primary medical facility in the northern part of the Strip. According to local residents, for the 4th consecutive day, buildings within the hospital complex have been observed engulfed in flames. Violence escalates as Israel reports the killing of over 50 Hamas terrorists in the past day, taking the number of fighters killed around the hospital to 140, with 2 Israeli soldiers also among the casualties. In separate incidents, Israeli forces are said to have killed 2 Palestinians in the northern West Bank. Palestinian sources identified one of the deceased as a Hamas militant. Additionally, another Palestinian was reportedly killed in an Israeli military operation in Al-Farah camp south of Tubas. The West Bank has witnessed a surge in violence since the onset of the Israel-Hamas conflict in Gaza in October. In a statement, Israel said it has been bracing for possible Iranian retaliation for the killing of a senior general and 6 other Iranian officers in an airstrike in Damascus.
In recent months, we have improved and advanced our offensive capabilities, and we will know how to act where needed. We have a multiple layered defense capabilities that has proven itself during the war with thousands of successful interceptions. But still beside this, the protection is never hermetic.
While hundreds of protesters gathered in Tel Aviv to continue pressure on the Israeli government to reach an agreement with Hamas on the release of the hostages. Pressure is mounting on the Israeli government from the families of 133 Israeli hostages who are believed to still be held by Hamas in Gaza. No consensus has been reached yet in the talks mediated by the United States, Egypt, and Qatar regarding the release of the hostages. Rahul Upadhyay's report for DD India.
Meanwhile, hundreds of protesters gathered in Tel Aviv to continue to put pressure on the Israeli government to reach an agreement with Hamas on the release of hostages. Pressure is mounting on the Israeli government from the families of the 133 Israeli hostages who are believed to still be held by Hamas in Gaza. No consensus has been reached yet in the talks mediated by the US, Egypt and Qatar regarding the release of the hostages. Kremlin has said that an aborted 2022 peace deal between Russia and Ukraine could be the basis for new negotiations, but there is no sign that Kiev is ready for such talks. The Russian President Vladimir Putin has repeatedly said that Russia and Ukraine were on the verge of agreeing to a deal to end hostilities at talks in Istanbul in April 2022, but that the agreement was sabotaged. Putin again raised the subject and said that he was open for what he called realistic talks, but not for talks which Ukraine is holding, which seek to bypass Moscow and do not, in his view, take the new realities into account.
There are a number of new realities that cannot be ignored. But at the same time, this could be some kind of foundation for the start of negotiations. Any search for a political diplomatic settlement can only be based on negotiations. President Putin has repeatedly confirmed his readiness for such negotiations. And as you probably noted, yesterday it was said that of course any attempts to organize forums in search of settlement without the Russian participation can't be called rational and can't potentially be able to bring results.
DD India's Dasha Chernyshova gives us more from Moscow.
Well, the official position is Moscow has never shut the door towards the peace negotiations, even though through this moment Moscow has been achieving the goals of what it calls its special military operation in Ukraine by the military means. So Moscow insists that any peace negotiations with Ukraine should be based on something. They should be fair, they should be objective, and they should take into account the Russian concerns. Now, the position of the West is that there was the peace formula proposed by President of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, but Moscow says this is a non-starter. Moscow will not negotiate on the basis of these documents. That's why any possibility of talks, for instance, to take place in Switzerland, as this conference is expected to be taking place there, the Moscow will not be participating in those negotiations, saying that they are meaningless, because once again, this peace formula is not taking into account the new geopolitical situation that has emerged over the course of the past 2 years. Now, what Moscow calls for is the negotiations, perhaps on the basis of the agreements that were reached by the negotiating sides from Ukraine and Russia in Istanbul. That was in the spring of 2022. But again, this document, Moscow says, is already outdated, because Moscow now has 4 new territories enshrined in its constitution: the territory of the Zaporizhia and Kherson regions, as well as Lugansk and Donetsk People's Republics. And this has to be taken into account. And another position that Moscow is always repeating is that Ukraine has signed a law which prohibits the Ukrainian officials to hold negotiations with the Russian leadership. Moscow says once again that Ukraine has to first deal with that and then proceed to the talks. But Moscow has once again repeated that to this moment there is no possibility of the negotiations because of that Ukrainian law. However, again, Moscow is open for those talks.
Indeed, we've heard what Moscow thinks. Let's go to Megumi Lim now, who tells us more for what's happening in Kiev.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has repeatedly claimed that both Moscow and Kiev were close to an agreement to end the war during talks held in Istanbul in March of 2022, but that Ukraine backed away after Russian troops failed to take Kiev. Now, 2 years later, the Kremlin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov has said the 2022 document could work as the basis to start negotiations, but added that any future talks would need to take into account, quote, new realities. The document included provisions for Ukraine's neutral status and put limits on its armed forces. Peskov's statement came after President Putin's comments mocking the scheduled Ukraine peace talks set to be hosted by Switzerland in June. He said that it was impossible to decide anything without Moscow's participation, adding that Russia will not accept any enforced plans that ignored its interests. President Putin has also repeatedly dismissed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's peace formula, which calls for the full withdrawal of Russia's troops from Ukraine's territory and for Moscow to face an international tribunal for its actions. Megumi Lim in Kiev reporting for DD India.
The chair of the Senate Banking Committee, Sherrod Brown, on Thursday urged U.S. President Joe Biden to block import of Chinese-made vehicles from the United States' auto market. And this call marks the strongest action against China's automakers by a U.S. lawmaker so far. The White House has not made any comment on the letter sent by the senator to the U.S. president. 2,500 participants of all ages joined on Friday a dictation contest in Paris that featured a passage in the theme of the Olympics, as the start of that 100-day countdown to the Olympic Games kicks off or is near. In fact, the event was held in front of the Eiffel Tower. Still to come here on DD India News Hour. 2 arrested in West Bengal for the Bengaluru cafe blast. Rating agency Moodys maintains its outlook for India at stable. Meghalaya Strawberry Festival kickstarts.
Across the world have lost such perfect weather days to extreme temperatures and extreme weather events. We're just always hopping from heat waves, droughts, forest fires, to floods, hailstorms and cyclones, and then the cold wave.
Here the root cause is we are forgetting that our vernacular traditions have been climate friendly. Climate change is a new thing.
Yes.
None of us have dealt with it before.
People are not aware of the risk. They are unwillingly exposed to high level of air pollution, heat, both outdoor, indoor. So the first step definitely is that creating awareness among them.
Millions of liters of water flow down the Rhine. That covers Mannheim's heating needs several times over, even at such cold temperatures.
Rivers are squeezed into ever higher and narrow banks to give space to houses, industries, and agriculture. We need to reverse this approach.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Mark Lin. Here's a recap of our main stories. Chinese and Japanese Coast Guard face off in the East China Sea over the Senkaku Islands. China reasserts its claim over the islands a day after Japan, US and the Philippines hold Trilateral Summit in Washington, D.C. Violence escalates in Israel Hamas conflict. Israel reports killing over 50 Hamas terrorists in the past day. Campaigning is underway in full swing in India. Prime Minister Narendra Modi campaigns in Rajasthan and Jammu and Kashmir. The Home Minister Amit Shah campaigns in Uttar Pradesh. And for the Congress party, the President Kharge reaches out to voters in Karnataka and Rahul Gandhi campaigns in Tamil Nadu. And going back to our top story on the face-off between Japan and China in the Senkaku, close to the Senkaku Islands in the territorial waters there. We're joined by Ambassador Sanjay Bhattacharya, former Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, for his perspective on the story. Ambassador Bhattacharya, do you see this face-off over Senkaku as a warning shot by China or the beginning of some more, concerted military measures?
Well, as you know, the Chinese and the Japanese have had the difference over Senkaku, or Diaoyu as the Chinese call it, for a very long period of time. As Prime Minister Kishida was on a visit to the United States, a very successful visit, I'm not surprised that the Chinese decided to have one of their ships reach out towards the Senkaku at such a time to send a signal. Since this is something that happens rather routinely between the two sides, I would say this is more in the nature of signaling rather than something that is more foreboding.
The Chinese have, been slowly increasing the number of vessels entering the territorial waters in Senkaku. There were 16 reported in 2023. And, from 2016, they've been sending naval vessels in as well. So clearly their intent has changed.
The manner in which the Chinese intrusions into the Japanese territorial and economic zone waters has expanded is something that is worthy of examination. And this is something that is happening not only in the East Sea, but also in the South China Sea, where you see such similar instances with the Philippines. The Chinese side have said that they have a vision of a Chinese dream. By 2049, they would wish to reunify the motherland and bring back all the areas that are not currently in their control. Their primary focus, of course, is on Taiwan. But that is not to say that the other disputed areas, which include the Senkaku in Japan and the islands of the South China Sea, are also within its watch list. So what the Chinese have declared openly is that they will step up their activities. They have specifically mentioned that not only will they step up the number of civilian and fishing vessels going into these areas, they will actually organize them so that they go in large flotilla. But they will also have the Coast Guard come in, which is just short of the Chinese Navy, actually, in a sense.
Right.
And also we will see the intrusions in the airspace in these areas with reconnaissance flights going in. So in one sense, what you do see is that the level of activity is going to be stepped up in scale and also in terms of the symbolic effect that they have because of the involvement of paramilitary or military forces.
Ambassador Bhattacharya, also the Thomas Shoal dispute with the Philippines. Clearly the Philippines is relying on the United States, but what do you think? Do you think the US's commitments are as ironclad as President Biden makes them out to be?
It is quite interesting because President Marcos Jr. is currently on a visit to the US as well. And Biden, Kishida, and Marcos had a historic first time ever tripartite meeting. One of the key areas of discussion was the question of security and particularly how they are going to treat the mutual defense agreement that is in place between the US and the Philippines. President Biden has given assurances to the Philippine side that this is something that is ironclad, as he put it. And therefore, if there is any intrusion or attack on Philippines naval vessels, Coast Guard vessels, police outfits, then the US would come to their assistance. This is, of course, something that has been ratcheting up in recent months. As you would know, that the Philippine side has been trying to replenish and refurbish the marooned ship which is there in the shoal, and there has been a lot of opposition from the Chinese forces, which are located in the nearby Mischief Reef. And so the second Thomas Shoal has now become a bone of contention in which the Philippine side is being prevented from doing the refurbishment and replenishment exercise by the Chinese Coast Guard. So the Philippine side is obviously very, very upset about it. What has also come out is certain understandings that may have been reached informally between the former Philippine president and the Chinese side regarding this, in which it is suggested that maybe he had given certain concessions to the Chinese. So I think what President Marcos is trying to do is to get back the status quo so that the Philippines can maintain their presence over there.
Ambassador Bhattacharya, also the China National Offshore Oil Corporation has found a lot of oil in the South China Sea. I mean, this was the reason why the disputes became so serious, is because the UN in some report had said that there's potential for oil in the South China Sea, and that's when China decided that they wanted to stake claim, Taiwan stake claim for all these places. But how valuable is this in a world that's trying to move away now from fossil fuels?
Well, the hydrocarbon reserves are obviously a very important element in this game of sovereignty tussle and territorial claims that are ongoing between China and several littoral states of the South China Sea. So China now has problems on this count, not just with the Philippines, but also with Malaysia, Brunei, Indonesia, and Vietnam. And all of these actually have oil reserves in the area that is now called the 7-dash line, which China has, in a sense, marked a line which gets into the exclusive economic zone of these countries. The most contentious issues are the ones which are with Vietnam, in which there are very many proven claims, and there is drilling that's going on, and some of these blocks are contested. But also what we've seen is that the Malays and the Brunei side also have a similar situation, though the contestation on that particular front with these two countries is not as acute as it is with the Philippines and with Vietnam. So I think despite the fact that there is a certain debate and discussion about climate change and moving away from hydrocarbons, this is going to continue to be a strong economic issue apart from the emotive issue of the South China Sea sovereignty.
Finally, Ambassador Bhattacharya, the Court of Arbitration found that China had no legitimate claims. That happened in 2016. So, is it possible that, China can change the rules by force as it's trying to do, given the example that Russia has done with Ukraine and is trying to do that there?
So this has been a very serious issue of contention as to what should be the role of international law, or particularly UNCLOS 1982 in this particular context, and the so-called issue of the use of force to settle disputes or historical claims. And the last time when the Philippines took China to the UNCLOS Tribunal of Arbitration was in 2013, which was following the Scarborough Shoal intrusions in 2012, when the Chinese had taken over that particular island and set of islands, and Philippines went to claim that this was not in line with the UNCLOS provisions. In fact, it was in contravention. China decided not to join that particular case. And in fact, when the ruling came, which was largely in favor of the Philippines, it rejected that particular ruling outright and did not seek or try to implement it. So this brings up a very serious issue, because on the one hand, you have a major power like China and others which are not as powerful, obviously, which are now being, in a sense, subject to saber rattling by the larger power. And should the rule of law prevail, international law prevail, or should just be something that is decided by the show of force or the threat of use of force? This is something that I think needs to be discussed much more intently. China has been very steadfast in maintaining that this particular dialogue is something that needs to be done only bilaterally. In other words, China and Philippines or China and Vietnam, but not with the others.
Okay.
But this is something on which others also have to pitch in, because the South China Sea, where this is actually happening, is part of the global commons in which everybody has an interest. And the South China Sea is not China's sea.
Right, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Ambassador Sanjay Bhattacharya, for throwing light on the deeper issues involved in the conflicts in the South China Sea. Thanks for being with us. The two men who plotted and executed the blast that rocked Rameshwaram Cafe in Bengaluru on March the 1st this year, they have been arrested from Kanthi in Bengal's East Midnapur district. Let's look at this report.
In a major breakthrough in Bengaluru blast, the NIA arrested the prime accused on Friday. Musavir Hussain Shahzeb and Abdul Mateen Taha were caught after a joint operation by central intelligence agencies and police from Bengal, Karnataka, Telangana and Kerala, and are en route to Kolkata. According to police, the evidence indicates Shahzeb planted the explosive device placed inside a backpack at the cafe.
कल रात हमारे पास एक इंफॉर्मेशन आया. बेस्ड ऑन दैट इंफॉर्मेशन, उस इंफॉर्मेशन के ऊपर हम लोग काम किए और एक जॉइंट ऑपरेशन में स्टेट पुलिस एंड सेंट्रल इन्वेस्टिगेशन एजेंसीज का एक जॉइंट ऑपरेशन में इंफॉर्मेशन मिलने के 2 घंटे के अंदर हम लोग जो बेंगलुरु रामेश्वरम कैफे ब्लास्ट है उसके 2 जो सस्पेक्ट थे उनको डिटेन कर पाए.
According to the NIA, Taha was responsible for planning the attack. The NIA followed the terror accused using the cap he was wearing as a clue which traced him to Bellary. CCTV footage provided clues that the accused Shahzeb and Taha travelled in a bus. The police ultimately tracked their home to Tirthahalli in Shimoga. The search led the police to Kanthi, then in West Bengal, from where they were nabbed. Questions are being raised about the blast, which was of low intensity. The accused could have planned this as a recce to execute larger conspiracy in the city. Meanwhile, the Karnataka police is also investigating the terror modules in Shimoga district and are also gathering information of sleeper cells in the state, which usually provide support to the terror groups.
The rating agency Moodys maintained the outlook for the government of India to be stable. The long-term and short-term ratings of the government of India are pegged at Baa3 and P3. Moodys noted that India balances its large and diversified economy with high growth potential. It also asserted that India benefited from infrastructure development, digitalization and the rehabilitation of the financial system. Following a series of relatively strong growth numbers in the first 3 quarters of the financial year 2023-24, Moodys has revised India's real GDP growth projection to 8% for the full year. The agency expects economic growth to be sustained at well above 6% over the next 2 fiscal years. Let's take a look now at other stories making the news. India's Vice President Jagdeep Dhankar launched a book titled Law and Spirituality, Reconnecting the Bond on Friday, and this book delves into the topics of law, ethics, spirituality, feminism and criminology. The Vice President said that the book will serve as a great purpose to ignite the inspiration of serving humanity among readers. The Meghalaya Strawberry Festival kick-started today at the Solia village in the northeastern state of Meghalaya. The IAS Commissioner Dr. Vijay Kumar graced the event as the chief guest. The event aims to promote the flavorful strawberries of the state, the agro-tourism as well, local business centers, as well as to influence more farmers to pursue strawberry horticulture. People in northeast India's Assam, they thronged to markets to shop for items and delicacies ahead of the Rongali Bihu, or the Assamese New Year celebrations, which will be held on Sunday. Shoppers were seen buying the traditional gamusa cloth, various delicious dishes including laddus, pittas and other items to celebrate Uruka, that's the eve of Bihu. And still to come here on DD India News Hour. Ian Nepomniachtchi is the sole leader. This is at the halfway stage of the candidates tournament. Indian grandmasters will be looking to make inroads in the second half. They're not far behind him. India loses to Australia in the 4th hockey test at Perth.
India that invents. India that innovates. India that excites. India that invites. Land of possibilities. Teeming with opportunities. Watch India Ideas each Thursday 8 p.m. only on DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Mark Lynn. Shifting focus to the Asia Pacific, Myanmar citizens queued up at border crossings to flee to Thailand early on Friday, a day after Myanmar witnessed brutal attacks that have been growing in strength. More than 4,000 residents on Myanmar's border have fled to neighboring Thailand, fearing for their lives after hearing the sound of aerial bombing. Thailand's foreign minister has sent messages to Myanmar's junta to reduce the violence, adding that Thailand was considering alternative trade routes in case the road closures were caused by the fighting.
No request yet. Secondly, if the Myanmar soldiers want to flee into Thailand from the danger, we have a clear protocol set for this. They have to drop their weapons, change into civilian clothes before we would allow them to cross over the border as a form of humanitarian assistance.
On Friday, the Ministry of External Affairs of India convened its weekly press briefing. And I beg your pardon. And during the briefing, the official spokesperson addressed the press regarding the deteriorating security situation in Myanmar, emphasizing that it remains precarious and continues to worsen.
Regarding Myanmar, the security situation in Myanmar remains precarious and deteriorating. You've heard about the fighting that is going on, specifically in Rakhine State and other areas. We had issued some time back an advisory for our nationals so that they can take due care, and we want them to be safe, as also regarding Indians who are traveling to Myanmar, so that they can observe proper safety protocols and take care of themselves while we are there to take care of them as in the embassy is there to take care of them. We've also relocated our staff from Sitwe consulate to Yangon. So that is where the situation lies.
Dubai's vibrant Karama neighborhood is buzzing with the delicious flavors of Ramadan. This year's event, which is ongoing, proved to be a haven for the city's large Indian expat community, offering a nostalgic taste of home amid the festive atmosphere. Over 55 restaurants in Karama, they participated in the festival, showcasing a delicate array of Indian street food, and they were favorites among the people. After a long wait of around 3 decades, an Indian movie will play at the upcoming 77th Cannes Film Festival. The writer-director Payal Kapadia's All We Imagine as Light will premiere in the competition section. Kapadia had previously won the Golden Eye Award for Best Documentary at the 2021 Cannes Film Festival for her documentary A Night of Knowing Nothing. A joint production of India and France, the movie will be competing against Iranian filmmaker Ali Abbasi's The Apprentice, Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopus, and Yorgos Lanthimos' Kind of Kindness. Let's get to the sports news now. And hockey, India lost their 4th test match against Australia on Friday. After losing the first 3 games, the Harmanpreet Singh-led team, they were looking to end that losing streak. But once again, in the series, they had the lead. And again, the mighty Australians overturned it to win 3-1 in the 4th men's hockey test at Perth, and have taken a 4-0 lead in the series. The Indians started the tour on a disastrous note, losing 1-5 and then 2-4 against the hosts, but produced a stellar defensive display in the 3rd test on Wednesday. However, they squandered a goal lead to lose 1-2 in the 3rd game and now have lost again 3-1. At the halfway mark of the 2024 FIDE Candidates Tournament, the Grandmaster Ian Nepomniachtchi is back in the sole lead. In round 7, he survived over 20 moves of preparation from Grandmaster Hikaru Nakamura of the United States to make a draw. The Indian FIDE candidates contenders had a disappointing outing in the 7th round. 5 of them are in the fray. They managed no wins in the 7th round in Toronto. D. Gukesh fumbled a chance to take the sole lead in the men's category after he crashed to time pressure-induced defeat to Alireza Firuza. Vidit Gujarati, despite being on the front foot for a vast majority of the game, settled for a draw against the bottom-placed Nijat Abbasov. Pragnananda played out a draw against Fabiano Caruana, who's the 2nd-ranked player in the world, and his sister R. Vaishali crashed to a defeat to China's Li Tingji. India's other woman contender, Koneru Hampi, settled for a draw against Anna Muziachuk. On to the Monte Carlo Masters, and Stefanos Tsitsipas. His resurgence continues at the Rolex Monte Carlo Masters. The world number 12 on Friday eased to a 6-4, 6-2 triumph against Karen Khachanov to reach the semi-finals of the ATP Masters 1000 event. Tsitsipas stayed rock solid in the face of some aggressive early hitting from Khachanov before accelerating to an 83-minute triumph against the opponent just 5 places below him in the ATP rankings. The legendary Gardens of Ninfa, they have revealed all their majesty in a combination of art, archaeology, as well as nature. It enchants romantics the world over. the Ninfa Gardens in Italy. Well, that's all we have in this edition of DD India News Hour, but let's know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Mark Lin from all of us here in Delhi. Thank you for watching DD India News Hour. Namaskar.